Hmm. All right, okay, good evening. Okay, we'll get started for today's session. So, as usual, if you have any questions, put it into the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on it and answer your questions accordingly. So, let's get started with the overall first, and then I'll dive into what are some of the setups that I think it's worth noting for this week. Okay, so first off, here is the euro dollar. Euro dollar currently we have this push coming down pretty aggressively, and of course, market is kind of consolidating a little bit right now, very close to where that previous low is, which is where the current invalidation. Um, I would personally be a little bit more patient on this pair, in particular, because this seems to suggest that there's a little bit more downside, which means that our larger degree Y um, may yet to have complete, and there might be still a little bit more downside. Okay, so this one here, I'm just going to be a little bit patient on the things. Probably not going to be too aggressive in looking for setups. If you are into it, I would say probably more of a short term potential sell, right? If you can continue to get some sort of a corrective pullback here, then that would be a short term sell that we can look into, right? But of course, again, this bear in mind that this invalidation level can just serve as sort of a liquidity sweep when market take it out and then kind of instantly bounce back up, right? So if you're looking at short, it's definitely going to be some sort of a short term trade. Okay. Um, Pound dollar would be a better alternative if you're interested in selling the major pairs, right? So pound dollar over here, we are still anticipating a fifth wave development, and I think that we are seeing some sort of a decent. Just redo that. We're seeing some sort of a decent reaction of the 50 and 618 level right now. Okay, so if we can get a continuation, at least some sort of an impulsive move to the downside on the lower time frame on the H1, if we can take out some of these minor lows, right, that would start to open up some sell side setups, which you can already see. This can act as sort of a liquidity sweep, and then if we take this low here with an impulsive move, then that gap will be present as well. And of course, then that would actually open up a opportunity that we can look to sell, right? Right now, it's still a little bit early, but if I just very quickly show you what we mean on the lower time frame, right? So we have this high, our market took it out, right? So that is a potential liquidity sweep. This comes down impulsively down this low, right? And of course, ideally we have that fair gap created. The pullback itself would present a sell side setup. Okay, and that's something that we can look into maybe going closer towards the end of the week, right? I think that would present itself maybe on Thursday or Friday. Okay, so pound dollar potential, but you probably want to wait for that confirmation. Um, then we have the Aussie, right? Aussie dollar is currently testing the key level, so probably you just want to wait and until we get a decent reaction. Right now, it's just too early to really decide what pattern it's developing over here. Okay, this can potentially be a double bottom, but we want to see at least some sort of impulsive bounce to the upside first. So this one here is just going to be neutral for now. Nothing really much ongoing. Then we have dollar Canadian. Dollar Canadian, it's pretty clear as of now in terms of overall direction. We are looking at a possible new three wave development over here. Okay, so definitely more of an impulsive move, a bullish bias to the upside. Right. However, we would like to see some sort of a corrective pullback towards the 4050 range, um, to give us that opportunity to get involved in it. Okay. Anyway, this looks really crawlish right now, so you don't want to be buying at the top anyway. Right. So current invalidation level would be at the 1.3970. So as long as price actually respect this low, we're gonna hold on to the bias here on the upside and the anticipation of a WXY, right? A simple true wave move. Okay. This one here, we do have a setup already, but of course, price is still very much near the top, so it's gonna take some time for the setup to even complete itself, right? So you have that liquidity sweep, change of character. We need to see that sort of a pullback first. Okay. So right now we just need to be patient and wait out for it. Okay. So nothing much on that. So dollar Canadian, that's about it. Probably need to wait for the pullback. Then we have the yen pairs. We have dollar yen, pound yen, as well as odd yen, right? Among those three, the pound yen seems to be the clearest of all. Okay, though in general, this three would likely be in the same direction. Okay, so dollar yen potentially short term to the downside with a target around 154.7, 154. I don't have a setup on the dollar yen because if you go over to the hourly here, okay, the setup itself is lacking some sort of a fair gap, right? We do have the liquidity sweep here. Obviously, this low is taken out. We don't see a clear fair gap, but we do have a little bit of an order block, right? So it's still technically a valid setup, but since we have the pound yen as well, right, which to me it's a little bit neater. We'll talk a little bit about it as we progress into that. Okay, since we have pound yen, I'm just filtering out the dollar yen, right, and because they are just correlated. Okay, so this is on the dollar yen side of things. Okay, so personally, I'll just not focus on it, right? Since we are looking at pound yen, then I'll just leave this out. But if you're interested in this, right, I think that's where the opportunity is. You can look towards a target at 154.7 to 154. Okay, then we have gold. Okay, so gold over here, we are looking at downside, and this is basically a very clean expectation we are looking at, right? Which is a simple three-wave move here, right? There is the possibility where price can actually go lower as a channel, but to be conservative, we're just looking at the zone here around 3,900. Okay. So it's still huge, sufficient opportunity that we can kind of capitalize on, right? And currently here you can see it's an internal 1, 2, 3. Okay, very nice. And of course, we do have a setup here on gold that was just tagged in this morning, right? So this setup here, it's a little bit longer than expected in terms of like time duration in which price actually took to get involved in the entry. But everything is still basically valid, right? You have this little liquidity sweep, we have that change of structure, break of structure. Of course, this low is broken here as well. We have this internal liquidity high, right? And of course, we do have some confluences around that 67 Fibonacci. So right now, just very close around where the entry point is. Ideally, we want to see the market start moving lower impulsively. Okay. The invalidation or the stop is going to be just around this high, which is 4215. Target wise, can have a target one around 4,000, and of course you can use the higher time frame here for your secondary target, which puts you around 3,009, right? So if you're into gold, then definitely this is an opportunity you can keep an eye on. Again, in terms of trade management, you ideally want this to start moving lower impulsively, right? Okay, so that's on gold. If you look at silver though, we do have a little bit of a difference in the structure development. Silver over here had a very decent bounce off the 618, okay, which kind of opens up the possibility where this pullback is completed and we can expect more upside, which is a little bit of a counterintuitive because gold and silver tends to correlate. But in this case, we are looking at them independently, right? Because based on what the chart is telling us, seems like silver may experience a little bit more upside. Okay, but of course, you don't want to just buy into that. We really, if you want to buy into silver, we need to see some sort of a corrective pullback. Okay, if price just comes back down very quickly, obviously there's no buy. But if on the lower time frame we start to see some sort of a corrective pullback, it might open up the opportunity to look for it buy. Okay, so very quickly, just bring your attention to the hourly. Okay, what we have over here, okay, on the hourly time frame, we do have this potentially as a liquidity sweep, right? We don't really have a very confirmed kind of a break of structure there, but what we have is that this can be seen as a change in state of delivery, right? Because you can see here, we have all consecutive bearish candle, and then the price actually kind of took that level out, right? So that's what we call a change in state of delivery. Is some sort of a early confirmation that price is reversing. We also have this other block around the zone, right? So if you can put in the fibs from the low to the high, okay, we have this 67 around this confluences as well, okay. Um, but I'm giving a bit of time to see if we can get a corrective pullback first, right? So I'm not rushing into things. Just really want to give it time to prove that it's going to be corrective before kind of committing to a setup over here. Okay, so that's on silver. Possible opportunity that you might want to add it into your watch list and keep an eye on. Okay, then we have crude oil, which potentially may have completed a channel development. Okay, price actually make a decent bounce here. If you go down to the lower time frame, actually there is a setup building. Okay, earlier today in the morning, prices were still trading near the top, right? We haven't really seen this, right? This was developed throughout the day, so there is a possible setup. Personally, I'm just gonna avoid this. The reason is the part of the liquidity sweep and the change corrector or break of structure, if you put it that way, doesn't really leave behind a very clear fair value gap here, right? Now we do have a little bit of fair value gap here, but it's closer towards the upper top, okay, of the range, right? We have this as an order block, but overall, again, I don't really like the entire context on the lower time frame as part of a structure. Okay, but the higher time frame does give us a little bit of a clue that this might have been completed. So my take on crude oil is I would be a little bit patient in this particular pair. If this goes a little bit higher, then things are definitely clearer, right? Because then that corrective pullback would be much cleaner, right? Because then this would be more of a bigger impulsive move. So that's my take on crude oil. But overall, the bias is still pretty straightforward. Okay, I think the probability is still very much to the upside. Okay, S&P as well. This would probably have a buy setup or opportunity maybe closer towards the end of the week, right? We had a very nice little impulsive bounce. Okay, recent times not the cleanest movement, a lot of impulsive ups and downs, but overall we are now seeing a V-shaped formation. Very nice little reaction of the 6530. So any kind of a corrective pullback would present itself as an opportunity to look for a buy. Okay, this one here again, the setup is there. Okay, the setup is there. Again, this morning price was just very, very close to the top. Even now, price is still trading close to the top, right? So um, oftentimes in situation like that, I don't put in a pending order yet, because then you always need to like readjust as price continue to develop. So I'm keeping watch of this. If price starts to come down a little bit more, then definitely there is the setup, right? Because you can see we do have the fair value gap area, okay, confluencing very, very nicely with the FIPS, and of course we have a little bit of a liquidity sweep and change corrector over there. Okay, so S&P 500, definitely in the watch list. Perhaps tomorrow going into Thursday, if you start to see that corrective pullback, that's where the opportunity is going to be. Okay. Pound yen, right? So this is the yen pair that I'm definitely more interested in compared to the dollar yen as well as the odd yen. The reason for this is, number one, the room of which the price can actually move lower is wider, right? And from a H4 context perspective, you can see that this is a little bit overextended, and a simple pullback here is what we're looking at, right? And that's where I mean the room to the downside is a little bit wider, right? Because if you compare it to dollar yen, yes, it's wider as well, but you can see this push here is not as significant as the pound yen, right? Pound yen had a little bit more of an impulsive kind of a momentum to the downside, right? Huge, bigger candles. Now, of course, if you can compare it to odd yen doesn't have a significant room to the downside that we can look to trade, right? In fact, it has tagged this area once. There's a good possibility will continue lower a little bit, maybe to take out some of this lows here. But there's two element, right? One is the room in which price can travel. Pound yen and of course dollar yen is a little bit better, but in terms of the momentum to the downside, right? The impulse leg to the downside, right? The initial impulse. Pound yen is then cleaner than the dollar yen. Okay, so for that reason, because they're all correlated, okay, I'm focusing a little bit more on the pound yen side of things, right? So on a higher time frame, it's pretty straightforward. We're looking at the downside. If you go over to the hourly, this is the exact setup I'm looking at, right? It's a good thing that price actually came down from here, right? Because then this would start to build into even a three-wave development, right? So sometimes you just need to be patient, right? Sometimes you realize that, oh, it got very, very close to our entry, but then it starts to go away. In the context of things like that, that's actually not a bad thing, right? Because if this were to go back up, then this prove itself as a corrected pullback, right? It's a corrective move to the upside. And of course, this initial high here would then also act as an internal liquidity, which is great. Okay, so overall, this setup is still very much valid. Okay, nothing much has changed. Overall, I'm still having a pending order around that 206 level. Okay, the only conditions that this is not the best is that there's no liquidity sweep here, but it's okay because on the higher time frame, we're kind of catching that retracement trade, right? You don't need like perfect conditions, everything. We just miss that. I mean, we are missing that liquidity sweep, but everything else is more or less there. Okay, we have the order block, we have the change in state of delivery, we have the internal liquidity, of course, and then this is proving itself as a little bit of a corrective pullback, right? So all the conditions are still there, and to me, this is something I'm okay with, right? And the room to downside is huge, right? Which means have your first target here, and then you can go for extended target as well, right? So this is on the pound yen side of things. And then Aussie yen, we kind of mentioned it. Okay, not the best right now. Overall direction is going to be similar to the yen pairs, but this one here will probably just leave it aside. Okay, then we have pound odd. in the list, power over here, I think it's testing the key area, right? Which you can see previously acting at some sort of support, and then right now potentially a resistance. Um, you definitely want to have this in your watch list this week. Suppose if we can get an impulsive drop here, okay, clearing out this low, the corrective pullback would naturally be a nice, decent sell opportunity that we can look out for to target this low. Okay, why I say that? Because you can see how many times this has been tested. Um, we are simply just waiting for that confirmation, and the confirmation is basically this impulsive lane. Okay, so far the market doesn't seem to give any sign of it breaking up impulsively yet. It can continue to develop something like this, which turns into a crawl. That's fine, right? Because again, we're just waiting for the impulsive move to the downside as part of a confirmation. If you don't have that, obviously we won't be having a sell setup. Okay, so have this in your watch list. Probably it's gonna take a couple of days for it to really set it up. Okay, last but not least, I would like to talk a little bit about Bitcoin here as well. Just giving you a heads up. This one is on the daily time frame. Because on the 4 hour there isn't much that we can look into, so I decided to go a little bit higher time frame to see a little bit more data points. And potentially what we're seeing here is that Bitcoin might be developing as a 5-wave structure. Okay, so we do have this as a top, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? Now if price were to pull back correctively towards the zone, which is going to be around 89,000 to 94,000 zone, um, if it's not going to be an impulsive push to the upside, but it's just going to be a corrective pullback, then you need to be open to the idea that price can actually make another push lower, maybe towards 75,000. Okay, and that would be where that previous daily low area is going to be around. Okay, so let me just take the rectangle tool, right? So the zone here will potentially be something that prices might, test it. So what does it mean is that if today you're looking at shorter term, right, corrective pullback can be opening up as a sell opportunity. If you're looking more of a longer term, we have a buy position on the longer term. If price were to dip back towards like 75, 76 zone, 75,000 to 76,000, then that would present another opportunity that we can look to like add on, right? As part of the crypto portfolio. Good. Okay. So in short, there are a couple of opportunities that we are looking into, right? That includes the one that flag, and then there are a couple that will need a little bit more confirmation, which might take us maybe a couple of days for the setup to establish itself, right? So those includes like silver, crude oil, S&P, and maybe the pound odd if you add that into the list, right? Good. So up to this point, any questions from you guys? All good. Cool. If there are no questions, I think generally that's the week for, I would say that's the analysis and insights for this week. see how things go from here, right? Hopefully the sharing over here give you some insights on what to prepare for this week itself. And of course, all the best. And we'll keep you guys updated as usual, right, through the regular reports and updates. And I'll see you guys in next week's session, right? All the best, and see you guys next week, okay?